The impact of the war in Iran is reverberating around the world and is rapidly intersecting with the conflict in Ukraine. Could these two regional hotspots spark a global war? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, teams of Ukrainian military experts have been sent to Gulf states to help them defend against Iranian drones, while Russia is reportedly helping Iran with its drone tactics. With the two sides becoming involved in Israel and America's war on Iran, where does it leave their own conflict?
As bombs continue to rain down across the Middle East, the brutal war in Eastern Europe grinds on. And it looks like these two conflicts might be merging into one. Ukraine says it's sending military experts to help Gulf Arab countries defend against Iranian drone attacks. Kiev has expert knowledge on them due to Iran supplying Shahed drone technology to long-term ally Russia for use in the war in Ukraine. But Russia is getting involved too, with reports it's supplying Tehran with intelligence on US positions, something the Kremlin has denied. Iran's effective blockade of the Strait of Hormuz could also push up Moscow's oil profits, giving a boost to its war economy. And Putin is positioning himself for just that.
If European energy companies and European energy buyers suddenly decide to reorient themselves and offer us long-term, stable cooperation free of political considerations, then of course we have never refused. We are ready to work with the Europeans.
The Kremlin's strategic partnership with the Islamic Republic against American hegemony is now fusing two deadly fault lines. For years, the fighting in Europe has been viewed as separate from the conflict in the Middle East, but that paradigm has been destroyed.
Thank you, President Trump. Thank you.
The Trump administration has broken its foundational promise to end America's much-hated forever wars by joining Israel in Iran, setting the world on edge and destabilizing economies. The world has gotten smaller, become more volatile, and undoubtedly more dangerous.
Well, let's meet our guests. Joining us from Brussels, we have Elijah Magnier, a veteran war correspondent and military analyst. I'm delighted to say, here with me in the studio, Alexander Claxon. He's founder of the Global Political Research Centre. Jennifer Ewing, a spokesperson for Republicans Overseas UK, and Alex Vasiliev, a geopolitics and espionage analyst. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Jennifer, to you, first of all, the eyes of the world have really shifted toward the Middle East, and crucially, American eyes have shifted. That's very significant here for Ukraine.
Absolutely. And I think you could argue that American eyes shifted from Ukraine probably after the November 2024 election. You'll recall, which I'm sure we'll get into earlier, that a lot of the Trump coalition was built on people who did not want to continue in foreign wars that they didn't deem existential to the U.S. But yeah, I mean, you can definitely see a difference of the U.S. involvement in something they deem more interesting, more important to them by the actions over the last week in Iran versus what's gone on in Ukraine.
Alexander, just come in on that point. The Ukrainians should be worried, shouldn't they?
Well, I would say that Russia is probably one of the few countries that is winning from this conflict. We're seeing obviously the oil prices rise significantly. We just saw today again the oil prices reach over $100 per barrel. Obviously, that's going to give additional funding for Russia and its war in Ukraine. Of course, there are added benefits as well, including the fact that the West overall might be taking the rise of the ball in Ukraine, just generally focusing more on what they would perceive is to be a more pertinent conflict right now in the Middle East. So I think from that point of view as well, Russia will probably be relatively happy with the way things are going. Of course, it's always a positive for them when their perceived enemy, the United States, is bogged down in a war. We've seen Russia struggle over the past few years in Ukraine. And I think we can expect something similar perhaps with the United States. I think Russia will be very pleased to see that.
Thank you. Alex, give us the Russian viewpoint then. How is the Kremlin seeing this war in Iran?
I think it's very good for Russia and China and other countries which are not part of the so-called civilized world allegedly based on the rule of law. Because let's have a look at the bigger picture. The present moment is not just about the war in Iran or the war in Ukraine. It's about the global confrontation between the so-called civilized world and the so-called savages, right? And for the savages, for Russia, China, Iran, it's a very good moment to teach the collective West a good lesson, to explain it to them that you can't do this. You can't do this to us what you have been doing in the last 25 years. You can't invade us, you can't bomb us, you can't kidnap our presidents. It's a very good moment for Russia and China.
So you think Putin will be very happy this week?
I think he is very happy now.
Let's bring Elijah in Brussels. Elijah, give us your reading of the situation right now. How do you think the Ukrainians will be feeling seeing a lot of American muscle and might and money go into a war in Iran and not their fight against Russia?
Well, I think what's happening in Ukraine today is on the periphery of the biggest war that is going on in the Middle East. I think Russia and China and the rest of the world are extremely worried about the economic situation, the consequences, and who's going to win, or at least if Iran is going to lose or not, because that will decide the future of the Americans in West Asia, in particular when their bases in more than 7 countries are either completely destroyed or severely damaged. This is why the future of the world is decided today in the Middle East, where Ukraine becomes really kind of irrelevant in the war, even if Russia gained a little bit on the economy. But Russia also is concerned what's going to happen to Iran and its main passage toward Asia. And if there is going to be someone who's going to oppose the American and create a kind of a balance in the world, this is why Ukraine doesn't come first.
Jennifer, to you, a lot of people will be wondering why Trump has gone so gung-ho into this war on Iran with Netanyahu when he didn't really show the same levels of enthusiasm for the war in Ukraine, did he?
No, and I think the outlier is not the war in Ukraine. I think the outlier is the war with Iran. You'll be aware there's a very big argument going on within the Trump coalition of people who voted for him in 2024, who think this is a terrible idea, who do not think this war in Iran is existential to the U.S. interest, who do think we possibly got dragged into it by a foreign country, and are trying to figure out how do we get the president back on track and get out of this situation with at least damage to our troops, to people on the ground, to our reputation. I mean, there's so many different moving parts. But it's a problem, and it's being so played out in the American media as this is great, we're winning, everything is perfect, we can do this. And I don't know if it's because I'm an American that lives in the UK and I, have Iranian friends, I have Russian friends, I have all kinds of international friends, I read all kinds of media, but this does not look like it's going well for the United States of America. Of course, I want my country to do as well as possible, but this is not what we voted for, and this is a problem for the president.
Well, just on that point, I'm guessing you voted for Trump.
Yeah, I did vote for Trump, but I was definitely one of those people, call them sort of, the Gen X and younger generations, who said, I don't want these uniparties, because it's the Democrats as well, and trust me, I think if Kamala Harris had been elected, we would be further involved in Ukraine, Russia than we are right now. So a lot of people voted for Trump because he said, I don't want to be involved in foreign wars. It's America first, right? Close the border, fix the economy, get healthcare, bring back our manufacturing. He gets an A+ for closing the border. But the economy we need to work on, healthcare we need to work on, bringing back the manufacturing. And so a lot of people just cannot, as much as we, support the troops and support our country, we cannot think that this is possibly a good idea in any way, shape, or form.
Alexander, just come in on the issue of the military support for Ukraine, which Patriot missiles are a hugely important item of hardware that they need. They will now be going to the Middle East. They will be going to Israel and the Gulf states.
Right.
So Zelensky is losing here.
Well, first of all, Trump, when he became president, he already didn't want to show much support to Ukraine. He was essentially perhaps pressured into doing so by his European allies, perhaps by the defense companies, by the CIA. Who knows who pressured him to do it? But we know when he came in, he was always very much against the war in Ukraine. He wanted to end as soon as possible. That doesn't really understand what are they fighting about, really. And we all remember those scenes from the White House when he had a massive argument publicly with Zelensky. So, yeah, I completely agree. I think going forward, Ukraine will struggle to get military support from the United States. And even if and when this war in Iran ends, I think there's going to be even less appetite from the American people for the United States to continue to provide military support for Ukraine, because people will be asking, for how long? When is it going to end? You were supposed to be the president of peace, and he just established the board of peace, ironically, and now we've got a war in Iran, and if after that he continues to provide support with Ukraine, I think more and more of his base, the America First base, will be very disappointed in him.
Thank you. Alex, to you, what's the Russian strategy now when you see that America is preoccupied? As we're hearing from Jennifer, deep inside the Republican Party, there's no appetite for the war in Ukraine. Is the Russian strategy now to just grind on?
Yes, it is, I think. And it's interesting to talk about whether Putin, there's a lot of talk about whether Putin can influence the new Ayatollah Khamenei in Iran, or even if he wants to. I don't think he wants to, and I don't think he can. Here's why. The new Ayatollah, America and Israel killed his father, they killed his mother, they killed his wife, or they killed one of his children. So imagine yourself in this situation. There will be no ceasefire at all. And for Putin to influence Ayatollah Khamenei, I don't think he wants to, because as I said, it's a global confrontation. And for Russia and China, it's a very good moment to teach the West a lesson. And by the way, the economy is damaged, and Donald Trump is damaged personally, because the public opinion doesn't really support this war. And even MAGA movement, the supporters of Donald Trump are split. People like Tucker Carlson, for instance, or Megyn Kelly, they don't really like the war in Iran. So it's a win-win situation for Putin, Russia, and China.
Let's bring Elijah back in Brussels. Elijah, it was interesting to note one of the first things Zelensky did when the war happened in Iran was to offer Ukrainian drone expertise. And he moved at lightning pace to get his experts to the region to start showing people how these Shahed drones could be dealt with quickly, efficiently, and cheaply.
I don't think he's doing a very good job, because this is not the scale of what he and his people are seeing in Ukraine. Here we're dealing with Iran, a country that produces thousands of drones, but not only one type of drone, not only Shahed. We're seeing so many types of drones that are launched against the Arab countries, and they launch them in a very large number. The Emirate on its own said in the first few days they were attacked by 1,000 drones. So we're talking about one single country. To deal with such a quantity of drones against Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Bahrain, Oman, Jordan, Iraq, that is, I think, is overwhelming. However, it's interesting to see how the superpower like the Americans are asking Ukraine for help in the Gulf country. Maybe it's a symbolic act. You tell the Arabs that the Americans are trying to do something to support them, because they are extremely disappointed, because the Americans moved the bulk of interception missile system in Israel and Jordan to make sure they can intercept the largest number of Iranian missile and Hezbollah missile incoming toward Israel. So in the Arab state, they see this kind of a very small buffer that the Ukrainians are offering following the request of the Americans and the offer from Zelensky. But that small contribution is not a game changer, and is not going to contribute a lot in the course of such a violent war that is going on.
Thank you. Jennifer, to you, how welcome do you think Trump would have felt when Zelensky made the offer that his people would go to the region and offer everything they know about dealing with these drones?
I mean, I don't know is the answer how welcome he would have felt, but I think it's kind of a slap in the face to the American people, quite frankly.
What, offering help?
A little bit. When this war was, supposed to, I think a lot of us know that in April 2022 in Istanbul, there was a peace agreement on the table, and that got scuppered by the former U.S. administration, and my understanding is former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. So
Boris Johnson.
Boris Johnson.
Yeah,
so
give him his credit here.
Give him his credit. And so anyway, they just sort of said, keep fighting. And so they kept fighting, because it was so important. And now, Zelensky has time and, weapons that, quite frankly, the American taxpayer has paid for to help in another situation. I think it's bizarre, quite frankly.
Alexander, come in on that. Like, surely it was a goodwill gesture. Zelensky thought there was a deal to be done here. We'll give you the drone expertise if you send us some air defense missiles.
Well, look, I don't really think this drone expertise is going to make much difference in the war in Iran. I mean, look, of course, yes, Iran is using a lot of drones to attack American allies and Israel and U.S. interests, but nevertheless, it's going to be the big missiles that are really going to have a greater impact on the war in Iran, and of course the Strait of Hormuz as well. Essentially, I think whoever controls the Strait of Hormuz essentially is winning the war, regardless how much Iran is hit. Even if half its country is destroyed, I mean, that's not what we hope for. But even that will not really be considered a loss for Iran as long as they can control the Strait of Hormuz. That's really the key point, and that's why there's obviously all that fighting is going on around. Who really controls that? Whoever controls that essentially controls the global economy, and that's the key.
Jennifer, what are the Americans going to do about the Straits of Hormuz then?
The irony in all of this is I could argue that we had pretty decent control over the Strait of Hormuz, we being the Americans, in the lead up to it. Maybe you needed some more troops there, some backup, I don't know. But you can argue that is existential to the United States. But all of these other things like, the nuclear situation, the ballistic missiles, the unconditional surrender, this is all just a huge distraction. And again, the irony is now we've lost control over the thing that could really hurt us going forward, hurt our security, our economy, the things that America First people voted for.
Thank you, Jennifer. Alex, to you, oil prices we're seeing surge over the last few days. This obviously is very good news in Moscow.
Oh, absolutely. Of course, it gives Moscow additional income and also a political means to achieve their goals. Because the European Union planned to stop importing Russian gas and oil in 2027. A few days ago, Putin said, well, what about we stop it right now? That would be a great idea, because now we can sell our oil and gas to new markets in Asia and, let Europe rot.
And make more money because the price per barrel is going
finally, finally Russia will feel more confident, more assertive, and will start to use economic sanctions against its enemies, like Europe and the United States have been doing for decades.
Alex, do you think we are now at a turning point after 4 years of stalemate in Ukraine? Do you now think the war in Iran will propel Russia to what it will perceive as a victory in Ukraine?
Absolutely. I think that we are at a turning point in a more global scale. We are at a turning point in the confrontation between the West and the rest of the world. And I think the rest of the world is winning.
Thank you. Elijah, to you in Brussels, you're in the city that is famously the home of the European Union. How much fear do you think there is then across the European Union that we're at a pivotal moment for Ukraine?
Well, the biggest fear today in the European Union is actually not Ukraine today, because we still have 10 to 15 million barrels that are missing daily from the market of oil. And I think that is the main concern is the price of oil, the price of gas, diesel, and everything that comes with it, because fertilizer is not only oil and gas that goes through the Strait of Hormuz. So Ukraine has been a dilemma for the European because it is not something that they want to let go easily, because they can't explain to people why they have invested so much in a war that suddenly the president of the United States is saying, okay, now we stop. It's not switching on and off, particularly then we were told so many times by the Eurocrat in Brussels that actually this war is important because Russia is going to attack us after Ukraine, when we can see that Russia is not capable to take the 4 provinces that said it will conquer in 4 years. Therefore, all this narrative is falling, and now it is the economy that coming in, plus Donald Trump is saying, I want to make a deal excluding the European. So he's pushing the European on the side, and they feel like they are caught, and they're trying to convince Zelensky, who agreed not to really submit to the Americans' demand immediately, to be tougher with President Trump. And they have succeeded. The heavy bill that Europe is going to pay today because of the war that the Americans decide to conduct on behalf of one person political future, that is Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel, and the unforeseen consequences on the Americans' presence in the Middle East and on the whole world economy. That is the main concern today in Brussels.
Thanks, Elijah. Jennifer, to you, if Ukraine does start losing ground more rapidly in the coming weeks, will Trump care?
Well, I mean, obviously, Trump doesn't want to see loss of life, right? Like, and look, this is a bit rich considering the situation we're in right now in Iran. But that aside, you know, Trump has tried to broker peace between these two countries. I think he thought it, you know, this is a sort of a regional war. Will he care? I think he wants the fighting to stop. I don't think anybody believes Ukraine can win this war. I don't know what winning looks like. The European Union, the UK, even the previous administration in my country has never been able to say what winning looks like. So I think what Trump is looking at is, let's end this. Let's bring Russia back into polite society. I mean, the first, 15 years I lived in London, we did business with Russia. We built out the Russian capital markets. So I don't know. I think he might be looking towards that.
Alexander, the same question to you, really. Do you think Trump will care if Ukraine starts losing vast swathes of the Donbass?
I don't think that matters that much to him, specifically the land itself. I think, as Jennifer said, I think he does want to see the end of this war. But I don't think that that Russia will start suddenly just winning this war in Ukraine just because of this conflict in Iran. I mean, first of all, Ukraine has been provided with a lot of weapons over the past 4 years. It's not like they're just going to run out in a few weeks. Secondly, Russia is still struggling regardless. It's they've taken very little territory over the past year or so, and I think this war essentially will either continue to be a war of attrition, or it's likely it'll become some kind of a frozen conflict that we've seen a long time ago between Armenia and Azerbaijan, for example. I think that's something that could happen, where essentially the current front line will remain the front line where it's kind of frozen. But I certainly don't see Russia losing this war. As Jennifer said, it's pretty much impossible. Look, Russia is a huge military power, and it's actually it's insane that European and American allies felt that they could actually defeat Russia. What does that even mean? Does that mean that they have to give back Crimea to Ukraine? It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. So it does feel like that war in Ukraine was essentially used to try and diminish Russia, because the more resources that Russia spends on the war in Ukraine, essentially, the more it loses economically, technologically, and so on. So I do think, though, that this conflict will remain unresolved for quite some time.
Thank you. Final point to you, Alex. Just sum up for me the last 10 days, really, from the Russian perspective. It's been pretty much good news for the Kremlin, yeah?
It is. Yeah, it was. And Jennifer talked about bringing Russia back to the civilized world with a polite society. I don't think Russians want that.
What do you want?
I think most Russians want to be left alone, and they want to be strong and independent country in the reliable union with China, for instance. But thinking about going back to this G7, G8 situation, they don't want that, because that G7 thing, the so-called civilized world is not reliable. They really hate Russia, especially Britain, for instance. The Russophobia, the hatred and fear of Russia, is probably the most stable element of Britain's foreign policy. For centuries, the word Russophobia wasn't coined by Putin or anyone in the Russian media. It was coined in Britain 2 centuries ago. And by the way, Russia never invaded Britain. It never invaded any British colony.
But you did invade Ukraine.
Yeah, well, Ukraine is not Britain. So we're talking about G7 and the so-called civilized world. I don't think Russians want that anymore. They're not interested. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. On that note, Jennifer, Alexander, and Elijah in Brussels as well. Thank you all. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. And you can also listen to some of our other episodes wherever you get your podcasts. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.